Mukti Prade Devi Satchavachoy Namo Namaha. Vrindai Hai Tulsidevyaye Priyai Hai Keshavashacha Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satchavachai Namo Namaha. Vrindai Hai Tulsidevyaye Priyai Hai Keshavashacha Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satchavachai Namo Namaha. Jai Tulsi Maharani ki jai. You're online yet or no?
I'm just going to.
Thank you. Okay. You're just going to hold the phone by hand or what?
No, I'll be using my laptop, so I'll just get another stool.
Yeah, you better put it on top of something. Okay, good to see everybody here. Not online yet? Okay. A lot of people joining us so far. Okay, we're going to start. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Biyade Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Biyade Vijana Pallava Jare Rayo Kunja Biyade Kunja Biyade Yamuna Tira Mana Jare Rayo Kunja Biyade Kunja Biyade Madhova Jaya Sutapad, Paramahamsa, Paravidikacharya, also Tada Satashi, Shimad. His Divine Grace Sabaya, Chanananda Bhaktivedanta Goswami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Anantakoti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shidwaita Gadadha Shivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radhakrishna Gopa Gopinath Shyam Kund Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavanam Ki Jai Mathuranam Ki Jai Jagannath Swami Ki Jai Yamunamai Ki Jai Srimati Lasi Devi Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaur Premananda Hadivo. All glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is to Shri Guru and Gauranga, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya. Pudale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachani Nivashesha Shunyavadi Paschatate Shatarni. So Om Gana Timadanda Shah Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Miritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So please close the blinds behind me because it's a backlight, doesn't really work that well. Okay, so we're continuing with our study of the Sri Caitanya Caritamrta. We are reading from the 5th chapter of the Antya Lila of the Sri Caitanya Caritamrta by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, translated and commented on by Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. And we're continuing with the story about, actually first, yesterday we talked about the story about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Roy and the intimate pastimes of Ramananda Roy, like that. And anyway, so let's go ahead with this today with the readings from the Sri Caitanya Caritamrta and Prajuna Mishra yesterday too. So, Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda
Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. So we're on text 87. So we'll just read the Bengali and go on. Shri Rupa Dwara Vijera Prema Rasa Lila Kevushite Para Gambira Chaitanyara Kela. Also the Lord fully exhibited the ecstatic love and transcendental pastimes of Vrindavan through Srila Rupa Goswami. Considering all this, who can understand the deep plans of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? Sri Chaitanya Lila He Amritera Sindhu Trigadat Jagat Vasyaite Pare Yatra Eka Bindu. The activities of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are just like an ocean of nectar. Even a drop of this ocean can inundate all the three worlds. And Prabhupada's commentary, to inundate, basically, for those of you who don't know what that word means, it means to drown. Inundate the three worlds with nectar is the purpose of the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. How this could be possible was exhibited by Srila Raghunath Das Goswami and later by Thakur Narottama Das and Shaimananda Goswami, who all represented the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now that same mercy is overflooding the entire world through the Krishna consciousness movement. The present Krishna consciousness movement is non-different from the pastimes performed by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he was personally present, for the same principles are being followed and the same actions performed. What's that?
Somebody's on mute.
Yeah, but put everyone on mute. Same actions are performed without fail. So that doesn't mean that everybody in the Krishna conscious movement is in the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Those who were serving and in the right consciousness and chanting nicely, they are within the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That doesn't excuse your Maya. Like, I gave you the example the other day. When I got a traffic ticket, it wasn't a pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Pastimes of a rascal trying to enjoy himself. So, Caitanya Charitamrta Nitya Karapana Yahaite Premananda Bhakti Tattva Jnana. O devotees, relish daily the nectar of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita and the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, for by doing so, one can merge in transcendental bliss and attain full knowledge of devotional service. Wow. Means every day we should read a little Chaitanya Charitamrita. Hey Mata Mahaprabhu Bhakta Gana Lana Ilachale Vihariye Bhakti Pacharya. Thus, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, accompanied by his associates, his pure devotees, enjoyed transcendental bliss in Jagannath Puri Nilachala by preaching the bhakti cult in many ways. Banga Deshi Ekavipra Prabhura Charite Natakakari Lana Aila Prabhu Keshunaite. A Brahmana from Bengal wrote a drama about the characteristics of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and came with his manuscript to induce the Lord to hear it. Bhagavanacharya Sane Taraparichaya Tanre Mire Tanrakare Karila Alayaha. The Brahmin was acquainted with Bhagavanacharya, one of the devotees of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Therefore, after meeting him at Jagannath Puri, the Brahmin made his residence at Bhagavanacharya's home. Pratame natakagdenho tanre shunaila tanra sange aneka vaishnava nataka shunila. First, the Brahmin induced Bhagavanacharya to hear the drama, and then many other devotees joined Bhagavanacharya in listening to it. Sabe pashamse nataka paramavit uttama Mahaprabhure Shunaite Savara Haela Mata. All the Vaishnava praised the drama, saying, "Very good, very good." They also there's a little pronunciation there. Very good. They also desire that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu hear the drama. Gita Shloka Granta Kait Vitva Ye Karyane Pratameshu Nayase Swarupera Stane. Customarily, anyone who composed a song, verse, literary composition, or poem about Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu first had to bring it to Swarup Damodar Goswami to be heard. Swarupas Tani Utare Yari Lana Tanra Mana Tabi Mahaprabhu Tani Karaya Shravana. If passed by Swarup Damodar Goswami, it could be presented for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to hear. Rasabasa Hayal Yadi Siddhanta Viroda Sahitena Pari Prabhu Manehaya Kroda. If there were a hint that transcendental mellows overlapped in a manner contrary to the principles of the bhakti cult, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu could not tolerate it and would become very angry. Prabhupada explains that Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur quotes the following definition of rasa bhasa from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu Mathura Vibhanga, that's 9th wave, 1 to 3, 33, 38, and 41. Purvam ivanu shishtena vikalo rasa lakshana rasa eva rasabhasa rasagyaranu kiritata. Jus Trido parashas chanurashas chaparashas chate uttama madhyama prokta kanishtas chechami kramat praptai stari vibhavanu bhava jastu virupatam shantadayo rasaheva dvadasho parasamataha bhaktadibir vibhavajay Krishna sambhana varjitahay rasa hasyadaya saptaksantas chanur rasa mataka Krishna tat pratipakshas ched vishayashraya tham gata ahasadinam tada atetra pragyoy aparasa mataka bhava sarve tadava sarasabhashas chakechana ami prokta rasabhigyay sarve pi rasanad rasaha. A mellow, so a mellow means a taste, basically, for those of you who don't understand this particular expression. Like a taste, rasa means taste. Rasa means dance, and rasa means taste. Like you get a taste for a particular type of sabji, vegetables, or whatever, that's a rasa. You know, sweet or sour or astringent. These are all different tastes. Salty. A mellow, temporarily appearing transcendental but contradicting mellows previously stated and lacking some of the mellow's necessities is called rasabhas. I'll explain that. An overlapping mellow by advanced devotees who know how to taste transcendental mellows. Such mellows are called uparasa, sub-mellows, anurasa, imitation transcendental mellows, and aparasa, opposing transcendental mellows. Thus, the overlapping of transcendental mellows is described as being first grade, second grade, or third grade. When the 12 mellows, such as neutrality, servitude, and friendship, are characterized by adverse staivava, vibhava, and anubhava. I mean, I really have to explain those words to you. Staivava means you're basically your regular mellow. Let's say if you're in the ras of shanta or dasha or sakya, that's your staivava. You know, someone says, I'm a gopi, so your staivava is the conjugal ras. Got it? Bhava means emotion. So you have the emotion of those in the conjugal ras. Okay. That's a staivava. Vibhava. The vibhava is that which stimulates your emotion. In other words, there's two types of vibhavas. One is Krishna directly, and the other one is are things related to Krishna. Technically, it's called alambana and udipana. In other words, let's say this guitar could be a vibhava. How is it? Because it reminds me of kirtan. So I become ecstatic when I see the guitar. Or more directly, let's say a peacock feather. When you see a peacock feather, it reminds you of Krishna. That's an udipana. That means indirectly, it's not Krishna directly, but it reminds you of Krishna. And then Krishna directly is a lambana. In other words, when you see Krishna, that definitely stimulates your emotion. Or anything related to Krishna, that's udipana. Anyway, so that's a vibhava. And anubhava is the ecstasy that follows a voluntary expression of ecstasy that follows when you're stimulated. In other words, starting to dance, that's an anubhava, that's voluntary. Or let's say you decide to roll on the ground or decide to chant loudly, that's an anubhava. Or even you foam at the mouth. Don't do that. They're known as uparasa, sub-mellows. When the seven, in other words, just to tell you, when, in other words, uparasa means like the mixture of the different mellows, different let's just say relationships right now because it's easier to understand, or tastes, when there's a mixture of the different tastes. And some of them are acceptable and some of them are not acceptable. For example, sometimes you can put a little sugar in a salty preparation, or a little salt, in a sugar preparation, and enhances the sugar, although it's overlapping mellows. But still, it's tasty at that time. But if you have a lot of salt and you put a little sugar, it may not be so. Anyway, that's just an example. When the 7 indirect transcendental mellows and the dried up mellow of neutrality are produced by devotees and moods not directly related to Krishna, in devotional service and ecstatic love, they're described as anurasa, imitation mellows. So it says that the mood of neutrality is actually, mellow of neutrality is just like God is great. So let's take that. Not related to Krishna, they're described as imitation mellows. So in other words, if you have a mood of like neutrality, be neutral in this world, but it's not focused on God, then it's actually an imitation mellow. Like to say, I'm neutral, I'm Shanti, Om Shanti Shanti, like people say. You understand what I'm talking about? Om Shanti Shanti, no Krishna. Shanti Shanti Shanti, no Krishna.
That's is this the reason why this is called illusion?
Yeah, it's an illusion. It's an imitation mellow. You're imitating a devotee who's in Shantaras, or a person who's in Shantaras appreciating, I'm peaceful, someone who's in Shantaras, and they're appreciating the Krishna, how wonderful Krishna is, how great Krishna is, and they're just peaceful because of that. Wow, it's so wonderful, Krishna is great. It's neutrality. But if I just have imitation peacefulness, which is actually just imitation, it's not real peacefulness, because it's not, as Krishna describes in the 5th chapter of the Gita, in the 29th chapter, Bhoktaram Jagatapasam Sarva Loka Maheshwaram. That's actually like neutrality description, that particular verse. That verse says, Bhoktaram, to one understands that Krishna is the enjoyer, Krishna is the proprietor, Bhoktaram, he's the controller of everything. Yatwamam Shantim Richati, then he's peaceful. So that's the real Shantaras right there. But if one imitates being peaceful and spiritual, that's imitation Shantaras, or imitation mellows. If Krishna, you really have to read the Nectar of Devotion to understand these things. I'm just giving a brief overview. If Krishna and the enemies who harbor feelings of opposition toward him are respectively the object and abodes of the mellow of laughter, the resulting feelings are called aparasa, opposing mellows. So that's acceptable. Sometimes opposing mellows. Just for example, I'll give you an example in Krishna's pastimes. When Krishna saw Pundraka, Pundraka is imitation Vasudeva, then he started laughing. So he was an enemy, and then there was also the mellow of laughter there too, which is really... Experts in distinguishing one mellow from another sometimes accept some overlapping transcendental mellows as rasa, due to their being pleasurable and tasteful. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, Paraspara vayor yadi yogas tada rasavasa. When two opposing transcendental mellows overlap, they produce rasabhas, or an overlapping of transcendental mellows. In other words, rasabhas is not necessarily bad. Sometimes it's tasteful, and sometimes it's distasteful. For example, if I have the expression, this is an expression that's mentioned as a distasteful rasa. Like whenever I think of how wonderful Krishna is dancing with the gopis, I want to spit on lust. Yeah, that's distasteful, because you actually combine, Krishna and the gopis and the humor of conjugal love with ghastliness at the same time, or hate, anger. So it just doesn't work. You can't combine the two. So it takes some discretion as to whether something is tasty or not tasty. Uh-oh. Does someone have COVID? What?
Allergic to this.
Too allergic to the flowers.
Yeah.
Well, if it's marigolds, I'm allergic too.
Allergic to mask.
Allergic to mask. We'll get you a flower mask. So, next verse. Ataiva Prabhu Kichu Agi Nahi Shune E Maryada Prabhu Kariyache Niyamne. Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would not hear anything before Swarup Damodar heard it first. The Lord made this etiquette a regulative principle. In other words, he screened everything. That is, Swarup Damodar Goswami screened everything before Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu listened to it. Srupera Tani Acharya Kaila Nivedana Eka Vipra Prabhura Nataka Kariyache Uttama. Bhagavan Acharya submitted to Swarup Damodar Goswami. A good Brahmin has prepared a drama about Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that appears exceptionally well composed. Adau tumi shuna yari tumara manamane pache Mahaprabhu re tabe karaimu shravane. First you hear it, and if it is acceptable to your mind, I shall request Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to hear it. Swarupa kahit tumi gopa Parama udara yese shastra shunite hicha upajay tamara. Swarup Damodar Goswami replied, Dear Bhagavan Acharya, you are a very liberal coward boy. Sometimes the desire awakens within you to hear any kind of poetry. In other words, you don't have much discrimination. But, these are Nityasiddha devotees, so they're joking amongst each other. Yadva tadva kavira vakye haya rasabasa siddhanta viruda shunite nahaya ulasa. In the writings of so-called poets, there is generally a possibility of overlapping transcendental mellows. When the mellows thus go against the conclusive understanding, no one likes to hear such poetry. So, Yadva Tadva Kavi refers to anyone who writes poetry without knowledge of how to do so. Writing poetry, especially poetry concerning the Vaishnava conclusion, is very difficult. If one writes poetry without proper knowledge, there's every possibility that the mellows will overlap. When this occurs, no learned or advanced Vaishnava will like to hear it. So there's two things to be considered, is the overlapping mellows and improper siddhanta with poetry. Rasa rasabasa yara nahi kavichara bhakti siddhanta sindhu nahi payapara. A so-called poet who has no knowledge of transcendental mellows and the overlapping of transcendental mellows cannot cross the ocean of the conclusions of devotional service. Avyakkarana hi jane na jane alankara nataka alankara jnana nahiko yahara Krishna Lila varnite na jane se chara visheshe durgamake Caitanya vihara. A poet who does not know the grammatical regulative principles, who is unfamiliar with metaphorical ornaments, especially those employed in drama, and who does not know how to present the pastimes of Lord Krishna, is condemned. Moreover, the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are especially difficult to understand. Krishna Lila Gora Lila Se Kare Varnana Gora Pada Padma Yanra Hori Pranadana. One who's accepted the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Whoops. I bent and I lost my place. Hold on a second. Here we go. One who's accepted the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as his life and soul can describe the pastimes of Lord Krishna or the pastimes of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In other words, you have to be a pure devotee. Gramya kavira kavitra shunite haya dukha vidagdat miha vokya shunite haya sukha. Hearing the poetry of a person who has no transcendental knowledge and who writes about relationships between man and woman simply causes unhappiness, whereas hearing the words of a devotee fully absorbed in ecstatic love causes great happiness. Gramya Kavi refers to a poet or writer such as the authors of novels and other fiction who write only about the relationships between man and woman. Vidagda Atmiya Vokya, however, refers to words written by a devotee who fully understands pure devotional service. Such devotees who follow the Parampara system are sometimes described as Shashatiya Shya Snigda, or pleasing to the same class of people. Only the poetry and other writings of such devotees are accepted with great happiness by devotees. Rupa Yaichedvi Nataka Kariyache Arambe Shunite Ananda Bharihara Mukhabante. The standard for writing dramas has been set by Rupa Goswami. If a devotee hears the introductory portions of his two dramas, they enhance his transcendental pleasure. Bhagavanacharya kahe shuna ekabara tumi shunile balamanda janibe vichara. Despite the explanation of Swarup Damodar, Bhagavan Acharya requested, "Please hear the drama once. If you hear it, you can consider whether it is good or bad." Dvi dina dina acharya graha karila tanra agrahe swarupera shunite ichahila. For 2 or 3 days, Bhagavan Acharya continually asked Swarup Damodar Goswami to hear the poetry. Because of his repeated requests, Swarup Damodar Goswami wanted to hear the poetry written by the Brahmana from Bengal. Sabadlana Swarupa Goshani Shunite Vasila Tabe Se Kavinandi Shloka Patila. Swarup Damodar Goswami sat down with other devotees to hear the poetry, and then the poet began to read the introductory verse. Vikacha Kamala Netre Shri Jagannatha Asangye Kanakaruchiri Harmat Atmatamya Prapanaha Prakriti Jaramashesham Chetayan Avirasit Sadishatu Tava Bhavyam Krishna Caitanya Devaha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has assumed a golden complexion and has become the soul of the body named Lord Jagannath. That's really bad. You can't say that Lord Jagannath has a soul. Lord Jagannath is not different than Krishna. In other words, it's not that like Krishna is an ordinary person. He has a soul and the body is different. Whose blooming eyes are widely expanded. Thus he has appeared in Jagannath Puri and brought dull matter to life. Oh my God. So in other words, like Lord Chaitanya has appeared and Lord Jagannath was dull matter before. That's what he's saying. May that Lord Sri Chaitanya, Krishna Chaitanya Deva, bestow all good fortune upon you. Ashloka Shuni Sarvaloka Tahare Vakyana Swarupa Kahe Shloka Karaha Vyakyana Gyane. When everyone present heard the verse, they all commended the poet, but Swarup Damodar Goswami requested him, kindly explain this verse. Kavi Kahe Jagannatha Sundara Sharira Chaitanya Goshani Shariri Mahadira. The poet said, Lord Jagannath is a most beautiful body, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is exceptionally grave, is the owner of that body. Phew. That's like...
Is this an example of Mayavadi philosophy?
It's an example of materialism. Not exactly Mayavadi philosophy, it's just like materialism. You know, in one sense, the Lord is... But he's not saying that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has a material body. He's saying Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the owner of the body of Lord Jagannath. So it's not exactly Mayavad philosophy. Something in between. Sharire refers to a person who owns the sharira. That's us. Our body. Isn't it? We are different than our body. Of course, we don't own the body. The body belongs to Krishna. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita 2:13, Dehinos minyata dehe komaram yavanam jaratata dehantaris praptir namunyati. As the embodied soul continually passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. For the ordinary living being in material existence, there is a division or distinction between the body and the owner of the body. In spiritual existence, however, there is no such distinction, for the body is the owner himself, and the owner is the body itself, or himself. In spiritual existence, everything must be spiritual. Therefore, there is no distinction between the body and its owner. That's, the distinction is called a duality. Sahaja jada jagatera chaitana karaite nilachere mahaprabhu haila avir bhute. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu has appeared here in Nilachala Jagannath Puri to spiritualize the entire dull material world. Which is, in fact, that's true. But he's not come to spiritualize Lord Jagannath. Because he's not different than Lord Jagannath. Shuniya Sabara, that means seeing the deity just made of wood or stone, in which case one has hellish intelligence. Anandita Madha Dukkha Pada Swarupa Kahe Sakroda Vachana. Hearing this, everyone present was greatly happy, but Swarup Damodar, who alone was very unhappy, began to speak in great anger. Are Mulka Abanara Kaili Sarva Nasha Dvitara Ishvare Tora Nahika Vishwasa. You are a fool, he said. You have brought ill fortune upon yourself, for you have no knowledge of the existence of the two lords, Jagannatha Deva and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, nor have you faith in them. Purnananda Chit Swarupa Jagannatha Raya Tanre Kaili Jada Nashvara Prakrita Kaiha. Lord Jagannath is completely spiritual and full of transcendental bliss, but you have compared him to a dull, destructible body composed of the inert, external energy of the Lord. And Prabhupada comments, that if one thinks that the form of Lord Jagannath is an idol made of wood, he immediately brings ill fortune into his life, according to the direction of the Padma Purana, Arche Vishnal Shiladi Yashava Naraki Saha. Anyone who considers the deity in the temple to be made of stone or wood is a resident of hell. Thus one who thinks that the body of Lord Jagannath is made of matter, and who distinguishes between Lord Jagannath's body and his soul, is condemned, for he is an offender. A pure devotee who knows the science of Krishna consciousness makes no distinction between Lord Jagannath and his body. He knows that they are identical, just as Lord Krishna and his soul are one and the same. When one's eyes are purified by devotional service performed on the spiritual platform, one can actually envision Lord Jagannath and his body as being completely spiritual. The advanced devotee, therefore, does not see the worshipable deity as having a soul within a body, like an ordinary human being. There is no distinction between the body and the soul of Lord Jagannath, for Lord Jagannath is Satchidananda Vigraha, Brahma Samhita 5.1. Just as the body of Krishna is Satchidananda Vigraha. There is actually no difference between Lord Jagannath and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but the ignorant poet from Bengal applied a material distinction to the body of Lord Sri Jagannath. Purna Sad Aishvarya Chaitanya Swayam Bhagavan Tanre Karik Shudra Jiva Spulinga Samana. You have calculated Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, full in six opulences, to be on the level of an ordinary living being. Instead of knowing him as the supreme fire, you have accepted him as a spark. Prabhupada's statement in the Upanishads, it is said, Yathagnaya Vipulinga Yucharanti. Living entities are like sparks of fire, and his lordship, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is considered the original fire. When we hear this Shruti Vakya, or message from the Vedas, we should understand the distinction between the Supreme Lord Krishna and the living entities. A person under the control of the external energy, however, cannot understand that distinction. Such a person cannot understand that the Supreme Person is the original great fire, whereas the living entities are simply small fragmental parts of that Supreme Personality of Godhead. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 15:7, Mame Bangso Jivaloke Jivabhuta Sanatana Manaksashtani Indriyani Prakriti Stani Karshati. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the six senses, which include the mind. There is a distinction between the body and the soul of the materially existing living being, but because Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu and Lord Jagannath do not possess material bodies, there is no distinction between their bodies and souls. On the spiritual platform, body and soul are identical. There is no distinction between them. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 1:11-38, Etad nishanam ishasya prakritistopi tad gunai na yujate sadatma astar yata buddhis tad ashaya. This is the divinity of the personality of Godhead. He is not affected by the qualities of material nature, even though he is in contact with them. Similarly, the devotees who have taken shelter of the Lord cannot be influenced by the material qualities. His Lordship, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, is unaffected by the influence of the three modes of material nature. Indeed, his devotees are also unpolluted by the influence of the external energy because they engage in the service of his Lordship. Even the very body of a devotee becomes spiritualized, just as iron rod put into fire becomes qualified as fire because it becomes red hot and will immediately burn anything it touches. Therefore, the poet from Bengal committed a great offense by treating Lord Jagannath's body and Lord Jagannath, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as two different entities, material and spiritual, as if the Lord were an ordinary living being. The Lord is always the master of the material energy. Therefore, he is not doomed to be covered by the material energy like an ordinary living entity. Dvitani aparade haive durgate atotva totva varne tara eriti. Swarup Damodar continued, because you have committed an offense to Lord Jagannath and Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, you will attain a hellish destination. He's basically saying you go to hell. You're going to go to hell. You do not know how to describe the absolute truth, but nevertheless you have tried to do so, therefore you must be condemned. The Brahmin poet from Bengal was an offender in the estimation of Swarup Damodar Goswami, for although the poet had no knowledge of the absolute truth, he had nevertheless tried to describe it. The Bengali poet was an offender to both Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Lord Jagannath, because he had made a distinction between Lord Jagannath's body and soul, and because he had indicated that Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was different from Lord Jagannath, he had committed offenses to them both. Tatva Nyo refers to one who has no knowledge of the absolute truth, or who worships his own body as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If an Angraho Pashaka Mayavadi, a person engaged in fruitive activities, or a person interested only in sense gratification, describes the absolute truth, he immediately becomes an offender. Ara eka kariyacha parama pramata deha dehi veda ishvare kaile aparada. You are in complete illusion, for you have distinguished between the body and soul of his lordship, Lord Jagannath, or Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That is a great offense. And Prabhupada explains, when one differentiates between the body and the soul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he immediately becomes an offender, because the living entities in the material world are generally covered by material bodies. The body and the soul of an ordinary human being cannot be identical. The Supreme Lord bestows the fruits of one's activities, for he is the Lord of the results of fruitive action. He is also the cause of all causes. and he is the master of the material energy. Therefore, he is supreme. An ordinary living being, however, in his material condition, experiences the results of his own fruitive activities and therefore falls under the influence, their influence. Even in the liberated stage of Brahma Bhuta, for Srimad Bhagavatam 4:30-20 identification, he engages in rendering service to his lordship. Thus, there are distinctions between an ordinary human being and the Supreme Lord. Karmis and Jnanis who ignore these distinctions are offenders against the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. An ordinary human being is prone to be subjected by the material energy, whereas his lordship, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, Lord Krishna, or Lord Jagannath, is always the master of the material energy and is therefore never subject to its influence. His lordship, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has an unlimited spiritual identity, never to be broken, whereas the consciousness of the living entity is limited and fragmented. The living entities are fragmental portions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead eternally. Mami Vangso Jivaloke Jivabhuta Sanatana, Bhagavad Gita 15:7. It is not that they are covered by the material energy and conditioned life, but become one with the Supreme Personality of Godhead when freed from the influence of material energy. Such an idea is offensive. According to the considerations of Mayavadi fools, the Supreme Personality of Godhead accepts a material body when he appears in the material world. A Vaishnava, however, knows perfectly well that for Krishna, Lord Jagannath, or Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, unlike for ordinary human beings, there is no distinction between the body and soul. Even in the material world, his lordship retains his spiritual identity. Therefore, Lord Krishna exhibited all opulences even in his childhood body. There is no distinction between the body and the soul of Krishna, whether he is in his childhood body or his youthful body. He is always identical with his body. Even though Krishna appears like an ordinary human being, he is never subjected to the rules and regulations of the material world. He is Swarat, or fully independent. He can appear in the material world, but contrary to the offensive conclusion of the Mayavad school, he has no material body. In this connection, one may again refer to the above-mentioned verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Haribol 1:11:38. Etadishanam ishasha ishasha prakratisto pitad gunai na yujate sadatmastai yatabudis tad ashaya. The Supreme Person has an eternal spiritual body. If one tries to distinguish between the body and soul of the Supreme Person, he commits a great offense. So, just want to comment a little here. Like you see that whenever there's a talk about impersonalism or offenses or Siddhanta, misunderstanding, the Siddhanta Prabhupada really gets into the long purports, because this is following in the mood of his spiritual master, who was known as Nrsimha Guru, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, because he used to get really angry at anybody who spoke an opposite Siddhanta, that means against the Siddhanta, the conclusion, or anyone who was a Mayavadi. And Srila Prabhupada's own pranam mantra mentions this, Nivashesha Shunyavadi Paschacha Deshatari. That Prabhupada came to the Western world to dissuade people from the paths of impersonalism and voidism. So Prabhupada actually becomes very energetic in his purports whenever there's any talk about impersonalism, voidism, materialism, opposiddhanta, rasabhas, or any deviation. The Prabhupada is very strong in that regard. Okay, so now we can take questions from, first from the devotees here. We'll stop sharing. Does anyone have any questions here from any of the devotees about any of the things we've read today? No? Yes?
What does it mean if a living entity has a fragmented consciousness?
Fragmented consciousness. If the living entity has fragmented consciousness, I don't remember reading that. Can you read the quote right now? You got it? Living entities are part and parcel of Krishna.
The living entities are fragmental portions.
Yeah, they're fragmental portions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Then it says above that, His Lordship, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has an unlimited spiritual identity, never to be broken, whereas the consciousness of the living entity is limited and fragmented.
Oh, so that's it. Fragmented means in this particular context broken. So his consciousness gets broken, he can fall down.
Oh, okay.
So that's an unusual way of using the word fragmented, but that's how Prabhupada is using it in that context. So Krishna always has full consciousness, whereas the living entity's consciousness can be broken or fragmented. So, anybody else here have any questions? If not, we'll take questions. No, I gotta unmute everybody. We can take questions from our audience online. So, who wants to ask a question online? I unmuted, or I gave you all an opportunity to unmute yourselves. Raise your hand. No one has a question here. You want to take questions from people there? Everybody's very shy this morning.
Devotees in this forum, do you have any questions? Just raise your hand.
Raise your hand or type in the text window if there's any questions. Otherwise, we can end early.
In case if someone types.
What's that?
No, in case if somebody types the question.
It's going to be real small for me to read.
Okay.
Haribol,
Numbers.
Nandabaj. What's the question?
When we install a deity, and does the deity become same as Krishna, or there's no difference? No?
The deity, first of all, not only the deity that's installed, but even a picture of Krishna, somehow or other by Krishna's potency. As Prabhupada gave the example that an expert electrician can make electricity heat or cool. In the same way, Prabhupada can transform matter to spirit and also spirit to matter. Because Krishna wants to do that. So Prabhupada used that example. So when there is the form of the deity, not even installation, even before installation, Krishna is there. It's not that Krishna just becomes present in installation. Like I mentioned, Krishna's even present in his picture. The spiritual master is present in the picture. So, yes, somehow or other, by Krishna's potency, everything becomes transformed into Satchidananda. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, yes, Lord. So sometimes we have this concern that we have photos of Krishna in the calendars, and the calendar year finishes. How should we keep it? Because it keeps accumulating. Because
Yeah, actually, that's a good question. Actually, a question I just also had in Australia. That the devotees asked about something we used to have in ISKCON, which was called the sacred throwaway. You don't have sacred bin, sacred throwaway. So we always had a separate wastebasket or bin, whatever you call it here, for sacred items. And obviously, you accumulate all these calendars and old pictures and everything like that. You definitely don't want to put them in the same bin as your tissues that you're blowing your nose with, or the plates that you ate from, or any sort of other garbage. So you put them in a sacred bin, and what we used to do is sometimes we'd burn them. Of course, that may not be always practical. But at least when you do put them in the garbage, just wrap them separately. I mean, that's a really important point. Like Krishna is also present in the book. Prabhupada would get upset sometimes when devotees would even have the book upside down. It was on the bookshelf, and then there was one book that was upside down. Prabhupada get very upset. Prabhupada said, if somehow touch the book to your feet, you should just pay obeisances 100 times. I forget the exact number that Prabhupada mentioned, because Krishna is there in the book. And funny thing is that when you have a picture of Krishna on the computer, is Krishna there on the computer? Yes, Krishna is temporarily manifest in the computer.
Even on the phone.
Even in the phone. So just like on my phone, which is why very interesting, I have all of Prabhupada's books. You probably do too. There's a database. I have all of Prabhupada's books and all Prabhupada's lectures and conversations and letters and everything like that right on my phone. Whew. So how do you treat the phone? I don't know. It says that's a question I always had. What do you do? Do you pray to Krishna when you have to erase everything on your phone? But I think we can't get too crazy about the whole thing. It's an electronic thing, but still, it's an electronic image of Krishna, electronic manifestation of Srila Prabhupada on the phone. I have so many pictures of the deities on the phone too. So
on the T-shirts we have the Krishna's painting.
I would say that should be prohibited. Yeah, we talked about that before.
Even on the book boxes, it's written A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada.
Well, you have to actually have some label on the boxes. If you say this is a secret, we can't put the name on the box. I think you got to be practical.
Yes.
So, but I generally don't like it when devotees have pictures of Krishna or the spiritual master on their shirts. Because generally, when you clean your shirt is going to the same laundry as your socks and underwear and everything like that. So it's not a good idea. I don't have any pictures of Krishna. I don't have any on my body. I don't have any tattoos anywhere. Reminds me of the story that someone joined the movement. He had a tattoo of his girlfriend on his shoulder. And so he had the tattoo artist change it into Krishna. Threefold bending form, So it's changed his girlfriend into Krishna. Not a bad idea. But I wouldn't have a tattoo because, you go into the toilet and you actually see Krishna looking back at you. It's not a good idea. Yeah, so Prabhupada was very concerned with the sacred, maintaining the principle of sacred objects, and being very, very cautious. All right, that's actually a good question. So I would say you have to be very careful what you do with at least when you throw away the calendars or pictures or whatever you're doing, just wrap them up first. Wrap them up so they're not touching the other garbage. No, I understand when the garbage truck picks everything up, then ultimately it may be connected, but just pray to Krishna. What can you do? You have to be practical. You can't start a burn pile in front of your house every day. It's probably not legal anyway to do a fire in front of your house.
What about to bury them?
Well, then you have to get a backhoe and everything. Come on, can you imagine burying all this? Sometimes you have piles and piles of sacred objects.
True.
You have to get one of these machines rented. It's a backhoe, to dig a big hole in the ground in your front yard, destroy your yard, and bury everything. And the neighbors are just wondering why you're burying all the papers in your front of your house.
In Fiji, we used to put in the river or in the sea.
Yeah, that's one thing is you can always put in the river or the sea, but ultimately you may get arrested for pollution. Isn't it? It is illegal to dump things in the ocean.
Yeah.
So it's probably I wouldn't do it because if possible, I would burn. But in most cases, it's not possible to burn. Actually, it's a good question about sacred objects. So here's the question. Same principle for the holy name. That's an interesting question. Yeah, we should be careful. Don't take the holy name in vain, you know. Actually, that's one of the 10 commandments that the Christians have. One should not take the name of the Lord in vain. Yeah, the holy name. But, you know, obviously we can say the holy name in every circumstance. You know, even when you're in the toilet or bathroom, you should chant too. I mean, what if you die there? People do die there. And if you can't chant, I can't chant, sorry, Krishna. Oh, not Krishna, can't say. You say, sorry, whoever you are.
I think there was a pastime in regards to that.
There's a
There was
pastime?
Like,
Gopal
yeah, Gopal Guru, yeah. Like there was a person who wants to go to the toilet and he was holding his tongue because he keeps chanting.
Yeah, yeah.
And the boy said that, don't you know that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said that there is no.
No, Nirmana Tishtan, yeah, there's no hard and fast rules.
Mhm.
Oh, he said the holy name printed, yes. Adidev was asking the question about the holy name printed. Yes, it is a fact. The holy name printed is also a sacred object. Picture of the Guru, picture of Vaishnavas. These are all sacred objects that shouldn't be mixed with the ordinary trash. Okay, I think we should end now because you all have to go online for your other class, right?
Yeah.
You got 4 minutes.
For us,
Yeah.
like sometimes they take the, in the phone we have like all the prayers, Krishna's picture and all the slokas, everything, but they take the phone in the toilet. So what do you think about this?
I think you just turn off the screen when you do that. I mean, what can you do? I mean, I'm traveling, you know, if I'm traveling, I keep the phone in my pocket. I can't just put the phone outside.
No, I wanted to know.
Someone will steal it, you know. Yeah, I think we have, in many cases, we just have to be practical. I mean, just make sure it's not showing on the screen. You just like press this little button, then it goes blank. And then you don't have a problem. I mean, it would just be completely crazy. The sacred phone, the sacred dhoti, you can't wear this, the sacred body. You know, using my body and my glasses. I use my eyes to see Krishna, you know, so I can't bring my eyes to. You know, I think you know, after a while it gets a little wild. We start getting too much into these things. But at least, you know, the printing of the holy name, the pictures of the devotees, pictures of the deities, and, you know, paraphernalia we use for the deities and stuff like that. But it's interesting, when Prabhupada was first preaching, didn't have much facility for washing the pots. They washed them in the bathtub, in the bathroom. Yeah. And there was that one story. Yeah, it was in Moscow, where they made some extra sweet rice, and everything was in, you know, great demand there. They couldn't find milk. It was hard to find milk. It was hard to find rice. And they made some extra sweet rice, and they didn't really have anywhere to put it. And Prabhupada said, just clean his lota and put the sweet rice in it. Don't throw it away.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one has to be practical sometimes, but one has to be very careful about committing offenses. Okay, so time to end because you have another class, and I have to do the deity worship. Okay, so you're going to go.
Yeah.
Say bye-bye to everybody. All glorious to Srila Prabhupada. See everybody tomorrow.